These are the most expensive items on Pawn Stars. George Washington's suit. This man asked for $3 million for George Washington's suit. It is a suit that belonged to George Washington, the first president of the United States. The owner says he bought it at an auction more than 20 years ago and assures that it is one of the jewels of his collection.
Does it have a price on it?
Everything has a price.
So how much?
I wouldn't sell for less than $3 million.
Rick comments that George Washington was one of the most amazing men in history because he could have been ruler for life, but chose to retire after 2 terms and set the standard for subsequent presidents. However, he admits that he never imagined being able to buy something of his in such good condition, and knows that the price is unreasonable, so to be safe, he decides to consult with his trusted expert. The expert examines the garment and discovers that it was originally pink, a striking color that reflected status and elegance, something that George Washington always tried to convey.
So you think this is all legit and everything, right?
Yes, I think it is.
Rick is left in shock by this price, but he knows it can be worth that amount since it's an extremely rare piece. However, before making a decision, Rick wants to think about it and asks the seller to meet the next day. Rick meets with the seller again and offers $1,500,000 for the suit.
1.5?
No,
The seller quickly rejected this offer and was only willing to drop his price to $2,500,000.
absolute best price would be $2.5 million.
Okay, well, I guess the suit's out then.
Albert Einstein's math equation. This man wants to sell Albert Einstein's handwritten math equations. This is a piece of paper with mathematical calculations handwritten by the famous physicist Albert Einstein. The client comments that he was investigating and discovered that it is a very difficult item to obtain. Rick comments that Einstein was one of the greatest scientists in history, and his theory of relativity revolutionized the field of physics. Then Rick proceeds to review the piece of paper and recognizes some old mathematical formulas. However, he does not know if they were really written by the famous physicist because it does not have any signature, so he decides to call an expert to find out. The expert arrives and comments the following.
These things could go for upwards of $50,000.
Really? So, is it written by Einstein?
The expert begins to examine the ink to see if it is from the pens that were used at that time. Then he compares the writing letter by letter with other authentic documents of Einstein and finally comes to the following conclusion.
I'm familiar with this type of piece, so I have no problem with it. It's definitely authentic.
With that said, Rick asks the most important question.
Big question, what's it worth?
I put this value right at about $5,000.
The seller is disappointed by the price given by the expert since he wanted $18,000 for this object. After the expert left, Rick made this offer to the seller.
3,000 is what I could do. Obviously, a deal's not going to be made because we're really far apart.
Their prices were too far apart, so they couldn't reach an agreement. Super Bowl rings. This man wants to sell 3 Super Bowl rings. These are 3 Super Bowl rings from the San Francisco 49ers when they were NFL champions in 1981, 1988, and 1994. Rick explains that the players on the championship team receive a personalized ring with their name and jersey number. The seller indicates that these rings belong to the regular players, and that is why he is asking $112,500 for all 3 rings. Rick doesn't believe they are that valuable and proceeds to check them. Rick has his doubts, so he decides to call an expert to verify if they are authentic and to find out how much they are worth. The expert arrives and examines every detail of the rings, the quality of the diamonds, and the gold, and concludes the following.
They have the right diamonds, they're yellow gold. It's really a great collection of 3 rings.
With that said, Rick asks the most important question.
So what do you think they're worth?
I think retail, they're probably in the range of about $20,000 a ring.
The seller doesn't agree with such an evaluation of the expert and claims that these are extremely rare rings and are worth much more. Even so, Rick can't pay the amount the seller wants and offers him $45,000.
My best offer would be $45,000 for all 3 of them.
Unfortunately, I can't part with them for that price. It's just too low.
The seller felt offended by this low price, and in the end, no deal was made. Royal European armor. This man wants to sell an antique European armor. It's a 20th century Royal European armor which has gold details on the breastplate and a helmet with the symbol of British royalty. The owner comments that he found the armor in an antique shop and ended up buying it because he thought it was cool.
Looks like it has dragon skulls right here. It's pretty awesome.
Rick comments that this type of armor became obsolete starting in the 17th century due to the increase in firearms. So he suspects it could have been used for events and ceremonies, but admits to not knowing much about the armor, so he decides to call an expert. When the expert arrives, he analyzes the armor in detail and confirms that these armors were used by elite British soldiers for royal ceremonies. He then proceeds to review it and finds the soldier's number, revealing that it belonged to a high-ranking soldier, which increases its collectible value. After knowing this, Rick asks the following.
What's it worth?
It's worth, I would say, about $7,500.
The seller is disappointed by the price given by the expert, and Rick proceeds to offer him $4,500.
I'll give you 4,500 bucks.
Did you come up to 6?
No.
Could you do 55?
No.
The seller tries to raise the price even a bit, but Rick is not budging and stays firm on $4,500.
4,500 bucks.
You got a deal.
Sweet.
Chihuly glass vase. This young woman didn't know she had a very valuable work of art. It is a piece of glass made by the artist Dale Chihuly, recognized for his innovative blown glass sculptures. The owner comments that she got it from her father, who worked in the artist's house and received the piece as a gift.
How much you want for it?
Really can't take less than $10,000.
Rick admits that the price is not that unreasonable, however. He claims that there are many forgeries of famous artists, so he decides to call an expert to make sure it is authentic and know its true value. The expert comments that Dale Chihuly is the master of the era because he revolutionized art with glass sculptures that surpass words. The expert proceeds to examine it and explains that this color combination is very difficult to obtain, then looks for the artist's signature, concluding the following.
So, is this Chihuly?
And the signature is key, and it's actually perfect.
With that said, Rick asks the most important question.
So what did these go for?
Today, I would say that this is safely an $18,000 piece.
The seller is amazed by this high price, and after the expert left, Rick offered $8,000 for the piece.
My best price in the world is going to be $8,000.
I really can't take less than 10 today.
The seller wasn't willing to sell this art piece for less than $10,000, so they didn't manage to reach an agreement. Pokemon Cards Collection. This man wants to sell the rarest Pokemon in the world. They are 2 uncut sheets of rare Pokemon cards from the first edition of the game. The owner comments that he obtained them from another collector and that it was very difficult to get because they are the most unique and collectible cards in the world. Chumley is impressed but notices some damage on the sheets, and the owner explains that since they are from 1998, they have some wrinkles but are still very valuable pieces. Chumley admits that it is very rare to see uncut sheets of Pokemon, so he decides to call an expert to get more information before negotiating. The expert arrives and is fascinated. He explains that due to their rarity, uncut sheets are worth more than the cards individually, but that it all depends on how good condition they are. He then proceeds to examine them one by one and acknowledges that despite the sheets having some scratches, they are in better condition than others on the market. With that said, Chumley asks the following question.
So what kind of value do you put on these sheets individually?
So retail on this sheet, probably $10,000.
The seller was not happy with this evaluation since he thought it was too low and asked Chumley for $20,000.
The lowest that I would be willing to go, probably $20,000.
Well, that's a little bit out of the price range for me.
The price was too high for Chumley, so in the end, no deal was made. Vampire Defense Kit. This man arrived at the pawn shop with a very valuable anti-vampire kit. It's a kit with everything you need to face a vampire in the 19th century, with items such as a crucifix, a small cannon, silver bullets, a mirror, among others.
Everything is 100% correct, but vampires don't exist, so I just don't understand who would have this.
Rick asks him where he got it, and the owner comments that he inherited it from his grandfather, and that the thing is probably over 100 years old.
How much do you want for this?
Over 100 years old, I was thinking $6,000.
Rick comments that he has never seen anything like it in his entire career, and that he needs to call an expert. The expert arrives and explains that in the 19th century, people were obsessed with vampires, and that this kit must have belonged to someone important who wanted to protect themselves. Then he proceeds to review some items. But what catches his attention the most is the small antique hand cannon that by the details confirms that it is from around 1840. Rick then asks him what its value is, and the expert says the following.
Last one of these that was publicly sold at a major auction house sold for over $25,000.
Chumley and Rick are shocked by the price, and the seller is filled with happiness since the price is much higher than what he wanted. After the expert left, Rick offered $16,000 for the kit.
I'll tell you what, I will give you $16,000. I'm not going to go any higher.
I'll let it go for 16.
Silver bust of Julius Caesar. This man wants to sell a solid silver bust. It is a silver bust of Julius Caesar, the most important and famous leader of ancient Rome. Rome. The owner says he inherited it from his aunt, who had it as the main ornament in the living room of her house. Corey comments that Julius Caesar was an incredible character who changed the history of Rome forever. He then proceeds to examine it and realizes that it has a Vatican seal, along with a number that indicates that the bust has 500 ounces of silver. However, Corey has no idea of the artistic value that this work may have, so he decides to call an expert to find out. The expert explains that it is a silver replica of Caesar Chiaramonti, a marble sculpture that dates back to between the years 30 and 20 BC and is found in the Vatican museums. The expert comments that only 99 copies were made in solid silver with a license from the Vatican, which makes it a highly coveted treasure for art collectors. Corey proceeds to ask the expert about the value of this work.
So, what's something like this worth?
I wouldn't pay more than $50,000 because
The expert leaves and the negotiations begin with Corey offering $30,000.
I'll offer you about 30.
It's a little low.
The seller is very disappointed by this offer since initially he wanted $75,000, but he doesn't give up and asks if Corey can give him $40,000.
$40,000?
Yeah, we can do that.
Antique bells. This young lady didn't know she had some very valuable bells. These are 3 very old bells with a pre-Columbian style design. The young lady says that her cousin found them in a small antique shop, but doesn't have any more information on them.
I'm thinking that these went on dog collars.
Rick is very interested in the bells and comments that there were many civilizations in South America that created these types of objects, but he has no idea how much they can be worth, so he decides to call an expert on ancient artifacts. The expert can't explain how these bells could have ended up here. He comments that these belong to the Mixtec culture, a civilization that existed in a part of Mexico around the 15th century, and that these bells were part of the costumes of their dancers. The expert checks that they don't have modern materials and confirm that they are 100% authentic. That said, the expert concludes the following.
These are rare. I've got to value these at $2,000.
The expert leaves and Rick offers $1,000 for the bells.
So I'll give you $1,000 for them.
Sure.
The seller, without any hesitation, accepts the offer and leaves very happy. Collectible Ferrari. This man didn't know he had a small collectible Ferrari. It's a small, original red Ferrari from the 1950s. The owner comments that he found it in his grandmother's garage and decided to take it because he always wanted to have a Ferrari. Corey is impressed by the level of detail and comments that he doesn't know if it's a toy car or a scale model of a Ferrari.
How much are you looking to get out of it?
I'd like to see $2,000 out of it.
Corey admits that Ferrari collectors would be willing to pay a lot of money for a piece like this. However, she needs an expert opinion before she can start negotiating. The expert proceeds to examine it and confirms that it is a scale model of the Ferrari 500 that was used for display and advertising purposes, which makes it even more rare and collectible. After knowing this, Corey asks the following.
Give me an idea of what something like this would go for retail.
It's an amazing piece. You should have no problem getting anywhere from easily $3,000 to $3,500 for the piece.
The seller was very happy with this evaluation since it was much more than what he wanted. However, Corey wasn't willing to pay that, and his best offer was $1,200.
I'll go up to like $1,200, man, but it's
The seller thought about it for a while and said that the price was too low since the expert appraised it at a much higher value. The seller counter-offered with $1,800.
Let's do 1,800.
15, you got a deal.
All right, you got it.
All right, deal.